What's good, TMG fam? It's your boy L, and I'm back with another reaction, man. How y'all feel? Welcome back to the channel. Salute, man. Listen, one of the stories or movies that kind of ruined my childhood. I ain't gonna say ruined the childhood completely. That's probably too harsh. But scared the living hell out of me, man, was the story of the Titanic, man. They showed it to us in school when I was in elementary school, man. And the fear that it instilled, that it just put inside of me, man, is the same reason that I didn't get on a cruise ship until like two and a half years ago. So the video today, man, is pretty interesting to me. This is the 10 strangest facts about the Titanic, man. One of the greatest stories ever told. One of the most, I don't know, man. It's just one of those moments in time, man, that was just probably the scariest for those who were around in that time, man. And it continues to live on, that story of the Titanic and the history of the Titanic and everything that goes around, man. I don't know. Some people say it's still stuff laying at the bottom of the ocean from that, man. You know what I mean? So I want to get into this, man. 10 strange facts about the Titanic. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button and join the fam. Make sure you hit that bell next to it too, man. Everybody be hitting the subscribe button, but they be forgetting the bell. And then they be hitting me up like, oh man, I didn't know when they drop the videos. Some of that's YouTube, but some of that is people forgetting to hit the bell. So hit the bell, man. Let's get into the video. Here we go.
The sinking of the Titanic is an event that has left an indelible mark on the face of modern humanity. Though the tragedy occurred more than 100 years ago, the average citizen still knows about the supposed unsinkable ship. But few people know what really occurred on board. Today, we're looking at 10 incredible facts about the Titanic. It's well documented that the Titanic had many rich patrons. Because of the unsinkable ship's notoriety, the world's ultra-wealthy lined up to get on board. This included an American businessman named John Jacob Astor IV. Not only was he the richest man on board, he is widely believed to be the richest living man at the time. His net worth at the time of his death was $87 million. That's equivalent.
Wow. Wow. I know some people look at that like $87 million in today's time. Okay. That was 100 years ago. $87 million 100 years ago. Ooh, that's insane amount of money back then. It's still an insane amount of money today. Don't get me wrong now. Whoever's saying 87 million is nothing, we need to talk. DM me. We need to talk.
To $2.3 billion when adjusted for inflation. Astor left behind a number of accomplishments. He was a decorated military veteran and also wrote a popular science fiction novel called A Journey in Other Worlds. Like generations of Astors before him, he also made millions in real estate. In 1897, Astor built the Astoria Hotel, dubbed the world's most luxurious hotel, in New York City, adjoining the Waldorf Hotel owned by Astor's cousin and rival, William. The complex became known as the Waldorf Astoria Hotel and is still one of the most iconic hotels in the world more than 100 years later.
Where did you guys first learn about the Waldorf? I'm gonna tell you my was it Home Alone? I think it was the movie Home Alone. That's when I first learned about it. And that's sad, but it's true. I'm gonna keep it honest. I'm gonna be honest with you. That was true for me.
Tragically, Astor perished with his family dog Kitty. His wife and unborn child, who were on board, managed to survive and inherited his prodigious wealth.
Wow.
Violet Jessop is either the luckiest or the unluckiest woman in the world, depending on your perception. She was a British nurse who grew up in Argentina. She was 24 when she first boarded the Titanic, where she was working as a nurse. Jessop was not quite asleep when the Titanic hit the iceberg. She later wrote, "I was ordered up on deck. Calmly, passengers strolled about. I stood at the bulkhead with the other stewardesses, watching the women cling to their husbands before being put into the boats with their children."
Wow.
After 8 hours, Jessop became one of the small percentage of Titanic passengers and crew rescued by the Carpathia. 4 years later, she was on board the Titanic's sister ship, the Britannic, when it sank in the Aegean Sea due to an unexplained explosion. Britannic sank within 55 minutes, killing 30 out of the 1,066 people on board. British authorities hypothesized that the ship was either struck by a torpedo or hit a mine planted by German forces.
Wow. Wow. And that's crazy because we watched the top 10 video not too long ago where something had washed up on shore and people were taking pictures of it and it was actually a bomb. So that's what I'm saying, man. We don't know what's in the water. It could be a bomb that hasn't activated yet, or somebody could have hit it with a torpedo. Like, the things is just the unknown, man. Just when you're out there, it's just still scary to me.
Remarkably, Jessup survived both of these capsized ships that were once believed to be unsinkable. In addition,
She's either lucky or she needs to be investigated. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to... She's either lucky or she needs to be investigated.
Been on board RMS Olympic, the eldest of the three sister ships, when it collided with a British warship called the HMS Hawke. Though it didn't sink, it was still remarkable that she was on board all three unlucky ships. Back before James Cameron was known as one of the most successful filmmakers of all time, he was a sci-fi filmmaker attempting to create a big-budget blockbuster about a cruise ship sinking 100 years ago. The film was Titanic, and it quickly became the most popular movie in history. When Titanic came out in 1997, it was the highest-grossing film of all time with a worldwide box office of over $1.8 billion. By some measures, it was the most viewed movie ever. But the film was not cheap to produce either. It cost a whopping $200 million, which especially in 1990s money was a ton of cash. Today, this would be equivalent to $360 million. But even more amazing is the fact that the movie was more expensive to produce than the original Titanic was to build. It was constructed in 1912 for a total cost of $7.5 million. Even adjusted for inflation, that is just $190 million, a full $10 million short of James Cameron's budget. However, Cameron's endeavour turned out to be much more successful than that of the unfortunate ship of the same name. Despite the fact that the Titanic was the largest ship ever constructed at the time of sinking, it still took 73 years to find its wreckage. Understandably, the ocean is vast.
73 years. 73 years to find its wreckage. That's why when people say, oh, this is extinct, this is no longer in it, how do you know? It's not like you can cast the camera into the ocean and see every square inch of the ocean at one given time. To me, it's just, and I don't know, man. For me, it just seems like it's impossible. It took 73 years to find the wreckage of the Titanic.
And even after numerous dedicated rescue missions, the public never knew where it actually rested. In the end, authorities gave up, and many decades passed before the Titanic was discovered by accident. The 1985 discovery of the Titanic stemmed from a secret United States Navy investigation of two wrecked nuclear submarines, according to the oceanographer who found the infamous ocean liner. Essentially, the discovery was part of a top-secret mission during the Cold War, but the Navy was sworn to secrecy on the matter until recently. On September 1st, 1985, a joint American-French expedition, headed by famous American oceanographer Dr. Robert Ballard, found the Titanic over 2 miles below the ocean's surface by using an unmanned submersible called Argo. This discovery gave new meaning to the Titanic sinking and gave birth to new dreams in ocean exploration. The initial purpose of the trip was to discover if there was any nuclear waste left over from 2 nearby submarines. But in the end, the mission was fruitful and led to the most famous underwater discovery in history.
Wow.
It's no secret that the sinking of the Titanic was a deadly disaster, but the truth is that the vast majority of the passengers died in the wreckage. Over 1,500 people died in the maritime disaster, while 705 individuals survived. Researcher Chuck Anesi crunched the numbers, breaking down the demographics of the survivors. He found that 97% of the 144 female first-class passengers were rescued, while only 32% of their 175 male counterparts were saved. Ultimately, he found that male second-class passengers fared the worst in terms of survival, with only 14 out of 168 making it out alive. The total survival rate for women was 74%, while the male survival rate was 20%. Another terrible tragedy is that the boat hosted many family pets. Though their quarters were opened after the ship began to sink, only 2 of them managed to survive. For one passenger, named Anne Elizabeth Isham, this may have led to her own demise. Legend states she probably died because she did not want to leave behind her Great Dane after the ship began to sink. A woman was reportedly sighted in the water with her arms frozen around a dog. In the end, she was...
Yeah, because it was that plus the cold weather. You know what I'm saying? So not only did the sinking of the ship, those who dove into the water died. You know what I mean? Those who probably caught hypothermia that were trying to float on different objects and different things. So it was a number of different factors that just went in and that attributed to the death toll, man, that ultimately was just a complete tragedy, man. Definitely.
Was only one of 4 first-class women who perished. Eliza Gladys Milvina Dean was a British civil servant cartographer and the last survivor of the sinking of the RMS Titanic. At 2 months old, she was also the youngest passenger aboard. Her parents had decided to leave England for America, where her father had family in Kansas and hoped to open a tobacco shop. The Deans had not chosen to be aboard the Titanic, but because of a coal strike, they were transferred to the ship and boarded it as third-class passengers at Southampton. Her father felt the crunch of the ship's collision with the iceberg on the night of the 14th of April 1912 and went up to investigate. He returned to their cabin, telling his wife to dress the children and go up on deck. Though she doesn't remember it, Dean and her mother and siblings survived, while her father perished in the tragic accident. As soon as Dean reached the shore, reporters crowded her, hoping to snap a photo of the Titanic infant. Almost 100 years later, she passed away at her senior home in England. Her ashes were scattered from a launch at the docks in Southampton, where the Titanic set sail.
Wow.
In the final years of her life, her housing bills were paid by Leo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, and James Cameron. The Titanic was a singular ship with some crazy statistics to back it up. For example, the ship was 883 feet long, burned 825 tons of coal a day, and used more than 10,000 light bulbs. Though many people perished during the crash, there were actually 2 workers who passed away during construction. In addition, the anchor was so heavy that it took 20 horses to transport it. The Titanic had a maximum capacity of 3,500 passengers, though there were roughly 2,300 on board when it sank. Of these, there were 13 honeymooning couples. This was not a very festive way to celebrate their marriage. Each lifeboat had a capacity of 65 people, though there were only 28 on the first boat. The Titanic was equipped to carry 65 lifeboats, but it only had 20 on board because they assumed...
And that scene, y'all remember that scene where it was that was hard to look at too, you know what I mean? The women and kids, the security trying to keep people back to allow the women and kids to get on the boat, other people showing other people's face as they're standing there hopefully awaiting that they can actually get to a boat to get to safety, man. That was just so much of a powerful scene because, you know, it just struck so many different emotions, man. It did, because you knew that if you didn't get on one of those boats getting out of there, man, that you were ultimately gonna die. You were ultimately gonna die. And some face were okay with it and some people were not. You know what I'm saying? So just that whole dynamic, it's crazy, man. It's baffling. Such a tragedy.
They would never need them. On board, there were 1,000 bottles of wine and 40,000 fresh eggs. An amazing 14,000 gallons of drinking water was drunk every day. Miraculously, the Titanic received 6 iceberg warnings before finally colliding with a massive icy monolith. 31% of the passengers survived, but 53% could have survived if the boat was properly prepared. The ship currently rests at 12,600 feet below sea level. The Titanic was the largest ship in the world for its time.
I didn't know they were warned that many times. That's the first time I heard that.
It was longer than the famous Lusitania, built in 1906, by more than 100 feet. The Lusitania itself was 790 feet in length. Before construction of the ship, 3 berths at the Belfast shipyard had to be modified to accommodate the Titanic and its 2 sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic. Also, across the Atlantic, modifications had to be made to the pier in New York City Harbor to receive these larger ships. The Titanic and its sister ships did not hold the distinction of being the largest ships for long, even though they were 883 feet from bow to stern. By 1934, the luxury cruise ship, the Queen Mary, took the honour of being the longest and largest ship. It beat the Titanic's length by 136 feet. It was 1,019 feet long. That's the equivalent of more than 3 football fields laid end to end. It was not until the 1990s that another cruise ship was built longer than the Queen Mary, but the current largest ship in the world absolutely dwarfs the Titanic. With 18 decks and 7 neighborhoods, Royal Caribbean's Symphony of the Seas is the world's largest cruise ship. At 1,188 feet, it's more than 300 feet longer than the Titanic and can house in excess of 5,000 more people.
Wow.
Frederick Fleet is a British man who is famous for a very unfortunate reason. Along with fellow lookout Reginald Lee on duty aboard the Titanic when the ship struck the iceberg, it was Fleet who first sighted the iceberg, rigging the bridge to proclaim "Iceberg right ahead." On the evening of April 14th, the Titanic began to approach an area known to have icebergs. The captain slightly altered the ship's course to head farther south. However, he maintained the ship's speed of about 22 knots. Fleet and Lee were stationed in the crow's nest of the Titanic. Their task was made difficult by the fact that the ocean was unusually calm that night. Because there would be little water breaking at its base, an iceberg would be more difficult to spot. In addition, the crow's nest binoculars were missing. Fleet later attested that if they had binoculars, he believed they could have saved the ship. Apparently, this information weighed on his spirit because Fleet hanged himself in 1965.
Wow, I did not know that. And I always thought about what happened to him or what was his side of it. You know what I'm saying? But I never knew that. And then he hung himself, man. That was a lot of pressure and a lot of things and a lot of probably guilt and probably a lot of thought of, if I did this, then this could have happened. Or what if I'd have done this? Or what if I'd have had this? Or what if he probably what-ifed himself to the point of just going insane and just took his own life, man. That's a lot for a person to deal with, man. So many deaths. And ultimately, you know it wasn't your fault, but you'll start feeling like it was because you could have prevented it. You know what I'm saying? So, whew, that's tough. That's tough to deal with, bro. Ooh.
It turns out fake news has been around for at least 100 years. Upon hearing that the Titanic sank, nearly all news agencies, including the Daily Mail, the Belfast Telegraph, and The World, reported that there were no casualties on board in order to maintain calm. However, this also gave false hope to the families of the passengers who learned of their friends and families passing in a cruel twist of fate. In Baltimore, the Sun's Evening Sun for April 15th devoted its entire first page to the disaster under the Good News banner and headlines, "All Titanic passengers are safe, transferred in lifeboats at sea." But other newspapers had the same story. In New York, the Evening Sun also exulted, "All saved from Titanic after collision." Some papers even reported that the ship didn't sink. The first paragraph of the Halifax Nova Scotia story states, "Held afloat only by her waterproof compartments, the Great White Star liner Titanic is slowly crawling towards this harbour." The Oswego Daily Times used a United Press Association story reporting the Titanic was not only afloat, but that her engines were working.
I'm sure they had the best intentions, but you almost kind of jeopardized your publication because of that. You know what I'm saying? So I'm pretty sure a lot of those publications lost credibility after that, man. That would be something interesting to find out too. But one thing that the Titanic, and I'll say this in closing, one thing the Titanic did teach me as well, in addition to a lot of other things, was it always made me feel like I never wanted to be the first on anything after that. Like, because you know a lot of people flock to that because they wanted to be the first ones on one of the biggest ships ever. You know what I'm saying? So everybody ran to it. And it was just like, for me, after that, I was just like, man, I don't never want to be the first on anything. Let it go out. Let them figure out the course. Let them get comfortable with it. And maybe after a while, I'll get on it. You know what I'm saying? But y'all get at me in the comment section, man. Let me know what y'all thought of this video, man. 10 strange facts about the Titanic. And leave your boys some comments. Let's get the likes up and stick around and stay tuned to the next reaction. I'm out. Peace. Y'all stay solid. Hey.